Hello and welcome to Extraordinary Women in Tech Diamond Interviews. Today I'm delighted to welcome Lizelle Balanco, joining us from Portugal. Hi Lizelle, how are you?
Hi, Uli. Nice to see you. So great to be here.
I'm so excited. Lizelle has been a revenue transformation and AI leader at CloudFlare. She has been helping global technology companies scale through innovation, operational excellence, and AI. But beyond her corporate career, she recently became an author of her book, Design Your Next Chapter, a guide to helping people intentionally create what's next in their lives and career. So first of all, congratulations on publishing Design Your Next Chapter. And I think your timing couldn't be better. So many women today are asking themselves, what's next? What are they considering? If they're considering career change or changing a business or simply looking for more purpose. What really inspired you to write this book? And what's happening in your life that really made you realize that the time of creation was really important?
Just for me personally, I've spent years building a successful career, and certainly if you look at it on paper, there's a lot that I feel proud of. But I reached a stage where, I was just kind of in planning mode, planning career, planning finances, planning family. And I think a few of us have those moments in life where, we start to ask ourselves, what are we building? And what really feels right? And so it wasn't through, crisis or any big event for me. It was really just kind of growth over the last couple of months where, as I started having conversations with other women, we were asking the same questions of, what is next in life, and what's our purpose, and where do we really see ourselves? And so it was this kind of journey of discovery for me that kind of turned into something that I wanted to be able to share with people. And so when I looked at practical resources, I'm a avid reader. I love reading many, many books. And so I've probably read all of the motivational books out there. But I was really looking for something that's a lot more practical. And so, there was also this choice between, do I write a book? Do I do something that's more workbook style? And certainly the book might come at some stage in life. But for now, I really felt like a workbook is very suited to, kind of tailor a very unique experience. And also to have it very personalized. It's really about what you invest into it. And so, that's kind of where it started. And so, putting myself out there in the world and taking my own, kind of leap of bravery and what I advocate in the book as well. And so, here we are.
I love it. No, that's great. And also what you mentioned, book versus workbook, I think it's, as you mentioned, there's so many inspirational things out there, but they're not as practical. So when you think about workbook, you made it very, very to a point, right, where someone can just take it and implement it in their life. I wanted to go back to your personal journey. You spent more than a decade transforming revenue organizations, leading AI initiatives, and driving business transformation. Looking back at your journey, what was your biggest turning point in your career? Or maybe there was one decision that really completely changed the trajectory and, had a tipping point in your life.
Yeah. And again, I think so many women are exactly where I was in that. Certainly, I believed in success being, taking on every opportunity and climbing the ladder as quickly as possible. And I kind of reached that point where all of the uncertainty that we are surrounded with in the world right now brought me to a different path where I wasn't asking, what's my next title? What's my next promotion? I was more going, what really matters to me? And it's this amazing opportunity that I think we all have right now. And, the industry is shifting so much that, there's no wrong answer. It's just an opportunity. It's going, where do I want to be? What do I want to achieve? And it's making that rationalization for me between achievement and fulfillment. And, I don't always think they're the same thing. I think they can complement each other, but it's really kind of making that distinction between not being as driven towards achievement for me personally, but more being driven by fulfillment and, what really do my core matters to me, and I can do that in a work environment, of course. But it's also about, that balance between career and life, and really kind of asking yourself the right questions.
Yeah, and you're sharing that fulfillment, that sense of purpose once you reach those high, states in your career where it doesn't feel as fulfilling. I think that a lot of women feel this way on the top. It's lonely, but also lonely inside. Where what is my purpose? I would love to dive into your framework. So, can you share your framework behind designing your next chapter? If someone listening today, they feel stuck, uncertain, there's so many of us. What are the first few steps that they can take to begin designing what's next?
Yes. So really what I focused on in the book is three main stages. And so to me, that is pausing, discovering, and designing. And so the first phase, which I think is really where all of us get it wrong, is investing that time, like taking the time to be in stillness, creating space to reflect, make decisions. I think a lot of time we expect the answer to be there, the clarity to be there before we take action. And I think pausing is the first real step where you really kind of reflect inwards and you go, what is the reasons why, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling stuck, I'm feeling unmotivated, whatever's driving you to this space where you're feeling the need for certainty or the need for that next chapter. And so, again, coming back to the reason why I wanted to do a workbook is really investing that time. It's not the type of thing that I wanted kind of, playing on your Audible in the background, and you don't kind of, take that pen to paper and you really put down intention behind it. And so pausing, I think, is the first thing. It creates a space wherever you're comfortable, whether that's in nature, whether that's, in a space where you feel comfortable. Create that space, invest that time in yourself. And then the next thing is discovering, understanding, which I think, again, like, we tend to lose because we're in this hamster wheel all the time. We lose the sense of ourselves and what we value, what our strengths are, what, genuinely energizes us. And so during uncertainty, we typically just lose that North Star. And so discovering is really about, again, kind of, putting down with intention, what are those things that really matter to you? And that kind of drives into the last step, which is the designing phase. This is the most creative, most fun phase of, now that I have kind of taken the time, I've looked inwards, I've put, some of my strengths and values behind me on, what truly matters to me, to my core, what makes me happy. Now I get to design what is that next phase. And I think this is that leap of faith. This is where the bravery comes out, where, now you're thinking about what is the ceiling really. And that might be a business, that might be a next career, that might be, not a career, that might be life and looking after your children. It's very individual to, your individual journey. But this is the phase where, I feel often the clarity is actually this part. It's again not the first thing you're going to discover. It's going to be the last thing once you've actually put in that work.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that sometimes we jumped into designing really quick because we can't pause, we run, and we are go-getters. I think women in general, they just want to keep going, keep growing. And I feel without pausing and discovering, we can get to the design phase. But how do you make yourself pause and discover? For me, it's very difficult to, you mentioned maybe journaling or going to the nature. I maybe talking to someone, like going through what you are feeling. Where do you feel stuck? What other tools that you can give for women that feel like, I don't know how to pause, I don't know how to discover because I'm so busy, like my life and my time is just very, very, very filled with things.
Yes. Well, I'm a mother of two. I have a busy career, and I definitely resonate with what you're saying, is that, I'm very similar in the sense that, I don't haven't, before this kind of growth journey that I've been going through over the last couple of months, been truly intentional about investing that time in myself.
Mhm.
And so, for me, it's, maybe the start of my day once, kids are at school, and I've got my breathing room before I start my day, and investing that time and creating a ritual for yourself where you're creating a space that ends up, potentially being your favorite time within your day. And so I think it's really done with intention, and it's looking to your schedule in areas that you truly have that space for yourself. And it might even be, at the end of your day when you're in the bath, and you can have a glass of wine and just wind down and relax, but be intentional about that time. And so, I think that the whole reason behind us kind of getting to this next chapter is a lot of times those intentions and those thoughts and the things that we want to do are in our busy minds, in the back of our minds all the time. And we are replaying all of these things that we'd love to do. We'd love to start this business. We'd love to kind of venture into a new industry, but we never actually take the time to like really think about what that life would look like, what it would take to get there. And so finding that space, you can really kind of go through that thought process.
No, it's great. And I think a lot of women stay very long in where they are. And then sometimes they intentionally fill up the time that they don't have time to pause and think, because there is scarcity, there is uncomfortable feel of change. But do you think people wait too long in making career life change? And how can we recognize that it's truly time to move on and truly time to turn the page?
Yes, I 100% believe that. And, I'm advocate for that myself, just in the sense that we always convincing ourselves that, we'll change after the next promotion, or when the children are older, or after things calm down. And, the thing with life is that really pause is long enough to give us permission. And so I think we definitely wait too long for that certainty. And the truth is that, again, that certainty doesn't come before the action. And so we need to have the courage, the willingness to take that first small step. And that's really where the next chapter will begin.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I wanted to ask you another question. Like, sometimes when we design the next chapter for accomplished women, right? Right now we're talking to this circle of women that sometimes it doesn't fit into a category, right? It's a new business, it's a product, it's something very, very different. And there's so much judgment, so much, even family sometimes not agreeing with you of, what are you going to do? How would you really separate that from what you're really looking for as your personal self? Because sometimes we really lose ourselves in the career journey, in the family structure, in the titles, and also in this comfort level of being the leader in corporate. And here's my certain way of kind of retiring. So that's my biggest question. Where do we draw the line and start thinking about ourselves?
Yes. Yeah, we all work, around identities, and we all create these identities about ourselves. We are a title, whether that's a mom, whether that's, your title at work. And I think it's breaking free from those titles and seeing yourself for who you truly are. And I think we in this beautiful phase of life where life, career, parenthood, all of them blend together. And if you are your true authentic self, you are the same person in any of those scenarios. And so I think if you strip all of that away, and you can take that biased viewpoint away in going, I am this, you can really be anything. And so, that's a really good place to start off from, is just going, who you truly are is not your title at work. And as long as that is authentic, and what you are then pursuing is really true to yourself, I think the people around you will naturally levitate towards you and support you, and you attract much more positive if you're stepping into that frame of mind of going, this feels purposeful, this feels fulfilling, and you're on the right path.
No, it's great, Lizelle. I think also when we think about being stuck on designing next chapter, sometimes if we think it's one thing, and maybe that's where we have to separate and compartmentalize things that we love, right? There is a purposeful life, there's family structure, there's business, there is innovation and AI, and maybe instead of looking at it, okay, what am I designing? One thing, and then it feels scary that you're going to lose other things for your life. How do you really look at designing your chapter where you look at all categories of what you love? Because we have so many passions, we want to incorporate them, right? So to feel fulfilled in our lives. And is there steps or kind of little tricks that you use to get the design, everything that is there for you?
Yeah, so I think it's pursuit of who you really are, and once you start to step into those spaces where you get to explore that, it really opens up so much possibility, and so whether that's pursuing a hobby and you network with a different crowd of people, and you get into a different mindset of exposure to other areas that maybe sparks some of those creative thoughts and where you'd like to see yourself. And for me, just from a personal perspective, EWiT was exactly that. I wanted to kind of go through this journey of what is this next step for me, and surrounding myself with a community of women that thought very similarly and had very similar journeys really resonated with me a lot. And so I think put yourself into those areas that will kind of drive some of those directions. And life has a beautiful way of bringing opportunity, and so put yourself in those environments to create opportunity.
Yes, I truly believe that. I feel that if we are closed off and not sharing how we designing, trying to define it on our own in our heads, sometimes it's really closing us from opportunities to share, to be open, to receive advice, to receive support. And I always feel that we start with vulnerable sharing, with something that you're uncomfortable, because sometimes you have to hold some kind of personality or title when you are a corporate job, right? You have to keep a little distance, you have to be authentic, but still guardrails. But when you designing your next chapter, I think everything needs to completely shatter and fall off, and you become vulnerable and become who you are, even to yourself. I feel women, they have this way of protecting their own image that they carry, and they keep losing themselves, who they truly are, in that little girl in ourselves, that a kid that is trying to really enjoy life and live purposefully. But there is always this facade that they have to break through. So what you're saying is like pause, and maybe that could be the one area where you just shatter everything and start to be opening to yourself and then to others and sharing vulnerably.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually becoming yourself. It's not becoming someone else. It's actually a bit of a rediscovery of who you are and who you want to be, and really just leaning into that authenticity. I love what you're saying on some of this facade that we put on, especially in a work environment. And I think many of us throughout our career, go through moments where we are open and we are vulnerable, and we think that it's seen as weakness. And actually those are the moments that really shine, where you've spent that time, you've invested that time, and maybe it's a team member, and you've opened up those channels, and that's actually where like amazing things happen, and where you really build connection and deep relationships. And so I think it's also allowing ourselves to have those moments that there's no right or wrong here in what we need to pretend to be. We can actually just show up and be ourselves and be authentic.
Yeah, it's like a reverse engineering, right? When you are growing and you are living someone else's life in a way, like there is a lot of things at stake, and you are designing something for your environment, for yourself, but also losing yourself slowly, and then you moment of epiphany, and then you reverse engineer to finding and discovering your own self and becoming who you are truly after you've accomplished so much. I feel that there is just this curve, and then when we hit that top, we always, and your workbook is perfect, we have to pause, right? And then we have to shatter what we've already encountered for many years, break it all, break the barriers for ourselves, and then go into sliding scale of what we are. Like I feel I'm also in that area where designing is so much fun when you have your goals in there, you know, what you love. I wanted to ask you, Lizelle, what do you love? What is your next chapter looks like?
For me, it's really becoming more of me. You know, I don't think this earth-shattering moment for me is, you know, I'm going to completely reinvent who I am. It's actually getting, you know, closer to who I maybe used to be, and, you know, kind of lost in some ways. And so it's this journey of discovery for me on, you know, just becoming more of who I am. And I think every chapter kind of teaches us something. And you know, we might go through many of these different reinvention chapters where, you know, we need to kind of pull back and go, what really matters to me. And so, you know, I think for me personally, I'm showing up in a different way. You know, I am being much more intentional about the time that I spent with my family. You know, I certainly went through a period of time where the equilibrium was very much out, where, you know, work becomes everything, and it, you know, becomes difficult to really fit, you know, prioritization and family, and certainly yourself. You are like the last on the list after the family. And so, you know, I think for me personally, it's coming back to what are those things that truly make me happy, and you know, where do I want to be, and what does this path look like? And, you know, certainly writing this book was one of those big leaps of faith where I was going, hey, you know, I want to be in this position where I can help more women, and I can put some of these ideas and growth structures out there, and help more. And so, you know, it's kind of taking that leap of faith and being brave and putting yourself out there. And so, you know, it's amazing once you know, take that courageous first step, what happens and what momentum can bring. And so it's been an amazing journey so far, you know, just in a couple of days, and kind of the conversations that I've had and opportunities that are coming. And so yeah, I'm really, really excited for the future.
No, I'm so happy. And also you're designing your own way of, you know, a lot of women writing books and putting together a different path for themselves. But you also designing it in a way that Lizelle wants, right? It's in a way that connects to your personal goals. You're joining women in the community. Now you're becoming part of, you know, something bigger, giving back with your book, giving back with the frameworks. So that all fits into a little bit more diversification and purposeful life and giving back. And it's amazing. I would love to share the link with everyone who's listening of your book, and we'll do another session on next chapter in a way that will fit into projects or businesses or services. So diving in a little bit deeper into what could the next chapter looks like for everyone. So I'm so grateful to have you today, and thank you so much for sharing, for your thoughts, and thinking of how we're going through emotions, and we all have the same kind of desires, but we don't have the right framework. And sometimes that pausing, as you said, and curiosity, and then jump into design. I love those phases. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it was great to be here. And thank you so much for your time. And yeah, I'm very hopeful that, as our community is watching this as well, that, there's growth for them as well. And certainly I want to make myself available if, everyone feels the freedom to reach out to me directly. I'm very much purpose driven behind this, and I want to make sure that, I'm available to the individuals behind this community as well. And so, yeah, really excited for the next step.
Amazing. And have more women design the next chapter with your help. So looking forward to our next sessions. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.